Block grants. Okay, let me just put you back in a frame of mind from the weekend. Okay, so we're talking about the relationship between the federal government, state and local governments, which in other words is federalism, right? And some of that federalism is cooperative federalism. Some of it now, since revenue sharing, or we talked about crack, that switched over to grants. So you have categorical grants, block grants, okay? And out of that, guys, I think I talked about yesterday, just the sheer, or Friday, the sheer amount of money that the states get from the federal government for their survival. I showed you this, right? Okay, so listen, as revenue share started, this is 1981 to 2007, okay, federal aid to state and local governments by major agencies. So education here is this one right here. You can follow my finger here. A lot more funding for education over the years. A lot of that is like special ed. Agriculture is this gray one. It's just a steady increase of federal grants. Okay. Transportation. Okay. See that growing rapidly. Housing, urban development, other agencies, health and human services. This is before Obamacare. Okay. And then this graph shows you, does anybody know what health program was created in 1964? Government health program created in 1964. The other one, Medicare. Okay, Medicare. This is for health care for the elderly, like Social Security, right? You got to pay into it. Okay, now you can see the amount of that cost. This is where Obamacare kicks in. Okay, so you see it like, okay. So I don't know, but that's about $70 billion, $80 billion increase right there. Okay. So this just shows you that it keeps going up, the amount of money from the federal government to the states. Okay. So this graph is a compilation of all 50 states and where they get the money. So the biggest expenditures Kansas have are education, transportation, and then probably healthcare. When you talk about Medicaid, which is healthcare for the poor and poor children. Okay, so where does Kansas and other states get their money? Well, it does depend on the state. So like Texas and Florida do not have an income tax. Kansas has an income tax. So we're going to get that from general funds and the income tax. Now, the other funds and so forth come from like licenses for fishing, hunting, visiting a state park, also tags on your vehicles. As you guys know, those are expensive in Kansas. We've talked about that, especially if you have a new car. Yes? Okay. So that's where we get other funds. And then roughly for the states, on average, 34% now of the money that the state of Kansas is spending and other states comes from the federal government. Yeah.
Where does Texas get their like general funds from?
So they tend to have higher property taxes, fees for different things. They're going to, come up with the money. Now, Florida, they're able to stick it to the tourists. So like rental car fees, hotel taxes. So you travel to Florida, you help fund Florida schools, you help Florida transportation infrastructure and so forth. Okay. I was listening to a speech by Governor DeSantis. He's selling a book, so he's out doing a book tour. And he was at the Reagan Library in California. And he was talking about, now Florida has surpassed New York in population. Okay. So they're roughly the same population. If you look at the budgets, the state budgets for Florida and New York, the New York budget is about twice as big as Florida's. How much the state spends. Okay. And he was bragging about that. Okay. So it's a thing, guys, but here's the scary part. If you were to take away all the federal funding from the states right now, Kansas would have to slash education funding, slash transportation funding, slash funding for Medicaid, these sorts of programs. About a third of everything we get. for all the states comes from the federal government. So it started with that here. Try this little piece of crack, revenue sharing, and now it's almost full-blown dependency, and you can see the trend. Okay, so Medicaid expansion, which said to the states, remember, if you want to provide more access for healthcare for the poor in your state, we will send you money, but you've got to match it. So Topeka would have to match those federal dollars, okay, in order to get more money. Kansas rejected that. Some states accepted it, some rejected. Okay, now when it comes to talking about Medicare, you guys should all know this, okay? Just one day you will be old. One day your parents will be 65, okay? When you turn 65, most people will go on to Medicare, okay? Here's the catch, is if you're poor, you get covered by Medicare. If you're not poor, you will have to buy in. So even though you've been paying taxes into Medicare your whole life, you don't necessarily qualify for it. You have to buy in to get the coverage depending on your income. Okay, this happened to my dad. Okay, I think my dad assumed, I assumed this is before I was a government teacher. When my dad got really sick, he had to go like 24-hour nursing home. Do you guys know how much that costs a month to go in a nursing home?
Crazy expensive.
It's over $5,000 a month. A month. So we expected Medicare to help with that. It did not. Okay? Because my dad had too many assets. He had too much income. And so basically what they told us was, well, you need to sell his house. You need to exhaust all of your income, become poor, and then Medicare will kick in. Now that was upsetting to find out. Okay, so $5,000 a month goes quick. You know, your savings and so forth goes quick. So guys, you can buy insurance for this. Okay, long-term health, like for nursing homes, you can buy insurance. It's expensive. Okay, so the insurance covers most of the cost of that. Or, like I said, if you've saved your whole life and you get really sick, then you use your savings for that health care, or your kids, you know, kind of help you with that. Okay, but you got to learn the system though. Here's the system. If you're in a nursing home and you can get put back into the hospital, admitted to the hospital, Medicare picks up the next 100 days. So you go to the doctor with your loved one that's in the nursing home. You say, hey, can we get them admitted back into the hospital just for one day? Something's not right. We need them to go back to the hospital. Okay, you send them to the hospital, they send them back to the nursing home, Medicare picks up the next 100 days. We did that twice. My dad paid for it. He paid into this the whole time. From 1964, and he wasn't eligible. Okay, and I don't feel guilty about that at all. Okay, because he paid for it. You understand? Okay. So, you know, you got to learn the system. All right. So, and that's something my wife and I, like, we're getting older. We start talking about, should we get this insurance? It's kind of expensive. Okay. We probably should. This long-term health care, or long-term, you know, assisted living, nursing home care, that sort of thing. Something to think about. Okay. So we have full-blown dependency for the states with the national government now. Okay. This just shows you, this goes back to 1960. Okay. We're talking over $600 billion a year, and that money goes from the federal government to the states. $600 billion, guys. That's a huge chunk of the federal budget. So the last couple of federal budgets, without COVID, we were looking at about $4.5 trillion budget for the United States government. Okay, $4.5 trillion. So that's a significant number. Roughly about the same amount of money will be spent on paying interest on the national debt. 60% of all the federal budget will be spent on Medicare and Social Security. Okay, another 18 to 20% on the military. Okay, so that pie, gets chewed up, so we're seeing this has really changed, guys, from the 1970s. We've really seen this growth. Okay, and a lot of people don't know it. Did I talk to you guys about the frog in boiling water example? Okay, so if people don't even know what federalism is or how this relationship works, you don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Now the states are dependent on the federal government, so they have to listen to them. Okay, they have to do what the federal government says if they want this money. Okay, so that brings us to mandates. Now that the federal government has control, you do want to write this down. You do not have to write anything more than the first line. Okay, down. Okay. But basically, a federal mandate is this: I mandate that you all take notes today. And that includes you, Blaze. That's kind of how that works, okay? It's rules or regulations or mandates, requirements that the federal government places on the states. Okay. Now, some of these you'll probably agree with. Some you might have a little bit of a problem with. Okay. Everybody will have a different opinion on some of this. Like I said, you don't have to write all this down. Okay. Did we talk about asbestos last week? You guys know what asbestos is? It was used in insulation in most of the buildings that were built in this country from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So especially in schools. So this school had a lot of asbestos in it. These tiles would protect you from that insulation. And what they found out in the 80s, guys, if you breathe in the particles of that asbestos, it causes cancer, especially in like young developing lungs, like school children. Not good. Okay, and this building had a ton of it. So over the years, I don't know if you guys know this, the engine room down here, the boiler room, you guys know where that is off the Notre Dame hallway? Okay, we used to have our own energy plant on campus. We had these huge diesel engines that would power the school. Okay, so we had like a maintenance guy that made sure those big diesel engines were functioning. Okay, and then say when a student runs into the little thing over here, the whole school went. We had one student like ran into one of the electric boxes, and we all got to go home. Okay, in the parking lot, and everybody loved that girl for 4 years. I mean, like, you're awesome. Okay, we got to go home. Eventually, we switched over to the city's electricity. Okay, or what do you call it? Evergy is what it's called today. It used to be KG&E. And anyhow, guys, when they did that, when they changed that room, under this Asbestos Act, we had to take the asbestos out of that boiler room. So that over spring break, they didn't let anybody come into the school. They're removing hazardous stuff. Okay? And then the HVAC went down. Right? When you guys were freshmen, we had that big thing out there that was pumping air in, okay, and out. And when you do the repairs, you got to take out the asbestos. So the $5 million or plus, $5 million plus to fix the HVAC, guys. Most of that money wasn't actually on the ducts and the stuff that you put in. Most of the money was spent on removing asbestos. So over 2 summers, they put a wall and had to close off the school, and you got guys in here in hazmat suits removing asbestos. Very expensive. Okay, that's what they'll cost. But that is the mandate. If you upgrade your facilities, you have to fix it. If everything stays the same, just don't disturb the asbestos, and people won't have to breathe it. Okay. Like it was in the ceiling of the cave, ceiling of the commons, okay, had asbestos, and it didn't have these tiles over it, okay? You guys, I don't know if you've heard of the Americans with Disability Act, 1991. Okay, so like if we were to expand the stadium out here and put more bleachers in, we would have to make everything ADA, Americans with Disability Act, compliant. If we don't fix it or expand it, Don't change it. You don't have to do anything. But there's your choice. So now, does the government give you money? Did they help us with the asbestos removal? No. That's called an unfunded mandate. They tell you to do something and they don't give you any money to do it. Okay? Now, in some cases, they will give you money. So here with the Clean Air Act in 1970, and guys, this was needed. I mean, if you look at cities like Los Angeles, Denver in the 70s, smog, okay, with that smog over the cities, you have a lot of childhood asthma problems, health problems for the people, and so forth, because they're breathing in polluted air. Okay, so states were given money to reach certain goals. If you reach those goals, you didn't have the federal government getting involved. But if you didn't reach those goals, here come the feds, and they're going to tell you how to fix the situation. Okay, so it's kind of a choice. You fix it, or we'll fix it for you, and you won't like that. Okay. Strings attached. I might have talked about this when I was 17 years old. In 1986, they told the states, they said, here's all this money you can use for transportation. You want this money, here's the carrot, okay? If you want this money, you'll change your drinking age to 21. 49 states complied and got the transportation money. Yeah? Louisiana, I tell you this, Louisiana said, no, we're going to have young people come in here to Nolens and Bourbon Street, and we're going to have a party. And these young people are going to bring a lot of money into Louisiana, more money than we're going to get from the government for transportation. That lasted 2 years. Okay. Louisiana still has bad roads. Okay. It didn't work. It didn't work out for them. So by 1988, all the states had 21. Now, the cool thing about that, if you were 19 in 1986, when your state changed it to 21, if you were 19 or 20, 18, 19 or 20, you were grandfathered in. So like my sister, who was 2 years older than me, she had already started drinking and she was legal. Well, she was still legal after they changed it. I, who was 17, had to wait until I was 21 to legally buy alcohol and drink alcohol. I didn't drink. I wasn't a big drinker in high school, but when I got to college, I have to be known to have a few. But, yeah. So anyhow, yeah, that's how this system works. Okay. All right, moving forward, and I'll have a couple more stories like that with you, guys. Skipping that. Now, for the most part, guys, I've been railing against the federal government. Okay, and I know that's unfair. I have some positives here. So when you think of federalism, you can also think of the federal government kind of being an umbrella over the states, okay, and trying to standardize certain things that all states are equal in. And one of those, guys, is the environment, okay? So for those of you that are of the tree-hugging variety like myself, okay, this is a good thing. All right, we standardize the environmental codes for all 50 states. So there are minimums that you have to keep. Now, some states like California, they go beyond what the federal government does. So who has the most expensive gasoline in the country? California, okay? Because they have higher fuel standards than the rest of the country. They go beyond what the federal government says. So you're burning cleaner gasoline, has less, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it has less, particles, emissions that go into the air. It's cleaner. So like in the summertime, guys, in Kansas, there'll be you'll notice a little hike in gas prices. Because when we go to the summer, we burn cleaner fuel. This is a national thing. Everybody burns cleaner fuel in the summertime. Because with the heat in the atmosphere, it tends to trap those fumes, those fuel fumes, and the air gets pretty polluted. Okay, so here's a good tree hugging thing for you. Okay, in the summertime, the best time to fill up your tank of gas or to mow the yard is in the morning when it's cool. Okay, if you fill up your tank in the middle of the day, those fumes that come out, even though it's just fumes coming out of the, the pump into your car, it does pollute the air more when it's hot. Does that make sense? Same thing with mowing. Now, you don't want to wake your neighbors up at 7 o'clock in the morning mowing, okay? Some of you probably mow yards in the summer and stuff for money. So, I'm trying to sleep at 7 in the summertime, right? Trying to recoup all the sleep I missed during the school year, right? You too, probably. But anyhow, yeah, that's a smart thing. Now, you can do it at night too, in the evening, but you guys know in the summertime, when it's 100 degrees, it's still 90 at like 9 o'clock. Those summer dog days of summer. So the morning is the best time for the environment, okay? Trying to keep us good here. Now, this is big. So let's say you're a state like Louisiana. They have a lot of factories, a lot of industry. If Louisiana was able to come up with their own environmental codes and allow factories to pollute more, they would attract a lot more factories to Louisiana because, guys, it's expensive not to pollute. You understand? It's expensive to trap those emissions from escaping into the air. That costs money, millions of dollars. So if you didn't have to do that, you could come to Louisiana and pollute all you want. Louisiana would have all the jobs you ever want and all the health problems you would ever want. Okay? And guys, pollution crosses state lines. Air pollution crosses state lines. We get some of that from Denver, guys. We get some of their stuff. And in the summertime, when it's dry and there's wind and you get all the dust in the air, they always tell you whether the air today is healthy to breathe outside or not. We get those warnings, where, it's not healthy right now to go outside. Well, I'm going outside anyways. But, I guess you could wear a mask. Okay? I don't know what to tell you. But this is smart policy. I think the fact that we standardize it for all 50 states, that means states, businesses aren't fleeing to those states with low standards. Now, what they will do is flee states with high standards like California, which is what we are witnessing right now is an exodus from California. Not just people, but businesses. Same thing with New York. Okay, there's an exodus. Cost of living, high taxes, high regulations on businesses and so forth, okay? Now, what we can do as a state, guys, Kansas, and you guys, see if you agree with this or not. Let's say Cessna wants to build a new factory. Now, they're going to figure out where they're going to build that factory. They could build in Wichita, Kansas. Do we want that? Will that create, say, 500 really good paying jobs? That'd be pretty good, right? Like some of you could get a job there, right? But there's going to be other states that want Cessna to build there. So they're going to give them benefits. So we could say to Cessna, you're going to build this new plant over here, this new factory. We're not going to make you pay any property taxes on that factory for 10 years. To encourage them to build it here. You guys good with that? Or these greedy corporations, they should be paying their fair share. And by giving them this property tax break, they may go somewhere else. This is how states compete for business. Okay, the tax bracket. Okay, so think about this though. If you hire 500 people with good paying jobs, all of those 500 people are going to be paying what? Taxes. They may buy homes. And if they buy a home, they're going to be paying property taxes too. Income taxes, all kinds, sales taxes. They're going to be going to restaurants in the area, which helps the local economy, right? They're going to spend that money. So which is better? Taxing Cessna for property taxes and letting them leave, or giving them a good break and getting 500 good jobs here. This is pretty cool. They're going to, I read about this company is going to open up by Bel Air, like 2,500 jobs. Okay, big like factory type thing. Okay, which is great. I'm surprised they're building there because the water is hard to get there. But hey, I'll take it, man. I mean, this good jobs. Now, some of them will be, lower paying jobs, but some of them will be good jobs. Okay, and it's going to help our economy. I think anytime you get this, up in DeSoto, they're building that Panasonic electric car battery thing. Now, I have my opinion on electric cars and these batteries, and I mean, we've kind of talked about you got to mine for these materials for cobalt and what's lithium. Okay, where are we going to get these materials? A lot of places in the United States, because of our environmental codes, you can't mine for these in the United States. Okay, so they're mining for them in Africa, and who owns those mines in Africa? The Chinese do. Okay, so a lot of things we're doing maybe are benefiting China, but not really benefiting us. Okay, so these are things, public policies that we need to discuss and ferret out what's best for the United States. Okay, next thing that I think is a real positive for the umbrella of the federal government is this. So this, remember the 14th Amendment? Who had the 14th? Okay, 14th Amendment says, defines who a citizen is, right? And then gives equal protection of the law. Here's another thing it did. It incorporated the Bill of Rights into the states. So the freedom of speech, religion, no quartering of soldiers, right to bear arms, all this stuff is incorporated into the states, due process. So no matter where you live, if it's Alabama or Mississippi, and they're not securing your rights, your civil rights, guess who can come in and protect your rights? The federal government, federal courts, the Department of Justice, these sorts of things, okay? This is really what helps us get rid of Jim Crow. So we get, in the 1950s and 60s, they actually, enforced the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. In the 50s and 60s, we see the courts getting involved in local issues that are denying people their rights, okay? Discrimination laws and so forth, okay? This is good, right? This is good. We want everybody that lives in this country to be protected and have those rights, okay? So it's not all bad, according to Mr. Ebright, right? About all this, starting with crack, and I'm using these horrible analogies and stuff like this. This is good stuff, okay? So, guys, when it's all said and done, we've got us a tug of war between the states and the federal government. In some periods of American history, most periods of the American history, the federal government's winning that. In some periods, the states will pull back and say, no, that's our decision, okay? Not the federal government's, all right? So, this is important here, okay? I would write down just number one, okay? Number one. And I think that'll explain everything you need to know. States can be laboratories of democracy. What happens in a laboratory? You test things, you experiment with things, yes? So when we talked about the subsidiarity of the Catholic Church, where the problem exists, those people deal with it, right? So what states and local governments allow for, guys, is different solutions to the same problem. Let me give you an example. Right now, in the United States, about 60% of all the homeless people in this country are in California. They have spent over $10 billion trying to deal with this homeless issue. And you look at cities like Portland, Oregon as well. There's a ton of homeless there. Seattle, Washington. Why is this a problem in those cities? Because there are cities in California, mayors that say, look, we're not going to let this happen to our town. So as soon as you get a homeless person, some cities in California will say, look, we will connect them immediately. You're homeless? Okay, we are taking you to the shelter. We're going to give you housing. We're going to connect you with training, education, okay, and help you get back on your feet. Give you somewhere to stay, okay? Now, if you don't want that help, which some homeless don't, they enforce their codes. The codes meaning you can't pitch a tent on public property, on a sidewalk in front of somebody's business, which is what they're doing in San Francisco. You have rows, it's like Skid Row, rows of tents in front of businesses. People are defecating on the sidewalk. There's needles, okay, like heroin needles on this, and kids walk to school by these homeless camps, okay, in San Francisco. They're not solving the problem, okay, because they're not doing it the right way, where some people know how to deal with it, okay? I heard an interview from, I forget what town it is in California City, that how they deal with the homeless problem, and it worked, okay? In the 90s, by the time we got to the 90s, guys, welfare, which we talked about a lot in this class, had really gotten out of control. Republicans take back control of both houses for the first time in 40 years in 1994. And there were two governors, one of Michigan and one of Wisconsin. They started experimenting with different ways to get people off of welfare to work. Things like, you can't get welfare unless you're working or going to school. Okay, you can only stay on welfare for a certain amount of time. And what happened in those two states, guys, was working. So the Congress said, hey, let's take these experiments that have been working here and try them nationally. Bill Clinton, Democratic president, signed it into law. Millions of people got off of welfare. It had become a way of life for people. They said, we're not going to do that. That's not healthy, is it? For people to be dependent on others, their whole subsistence, their whole life. It became a way of life. And they said, we're not going to do that anymore. Tough love approach. Okay? And guys, it worked. It really did. It worked. But we don't get these experiments. We don't have these laboratories if, 600 people, the Congress, the president, the Supreme Court, and, some federal cabinet agencies make all the decisions. That's a unitary system. Okay? And that's what we're moving towards. We need to keep these laboratories open and try and come up with new ways. Guys, there are talented, ingenious people in local state government that are willing to do the hard work to solve problems locally. Okay? And we need to let them do that. Okay? That's the way this thing was designed. All right? So, laboratories of democracy. Tug of war. Just skipping around here. You don't need to write this down. Okay? Hamilton called federalism an additional check on government. So, guys, if Congress proposes an amendment, do the states have to ratify it? No? Okay? Like the Equal Rights Amendment, right? We talked about the other day. Okay? It's up to the people, up to the states. Okay? Now, some of the things that we get at the local level, okay? Public education, you have school boards. We talked about the U.S. Department of Education, whether we should have that or not. That's probably a matter of opinion in here, okay? Fire protection, Sedgwick County Fire Department, Wichita Fire Department, car registrations done at state and local level, road construction mostly done by state and local governments with a lot of federal funding, okay? Libraries, public libraries, okay? These are the things that affect people's daily lives. And by using federalism, it involves more people in the decision-making process, people that are affected by these decisions and so forth, okay? So, here's your tug of war, okay? So this is just continued, okay? We try and balance these interests, okay, between the two. You don't have to write this down, okay? And then there's those argue that like these mandates that they don't give you money, unfunded mandates, and then other people, say no, this is expanded voting rights, protect people's their citizens, their rights, and the public good. The answer is yes. Some of this is good, some of this is bad. One thing is for sure though, the boiling water, okay, the slow boil of the frog is happened, and so now we have an amazing amount of dependency by the states to the federal government when it comes to running their day-to-day affairs. Okay. Now, one last example. Okay, and that is in the 1970s. I don't know if I talked to you guys about this. There was OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, put an embargo on the United States. Did I tell you this? Guys, we had a full-blown energy crisis in the 1970s. You can ask your parents about this, okay? OPEC stopped trading us oil. Now, we could get oil from Mexico. We could make our own oil and gas. We had a shortage, okay? Jimmy Carter was president. This is in the mid-70s, okay? And they used to put these little things. I think there's still one. If you go into the little lounge, the locker room for the football team back there where you guys have to do film, I think there's still a sticker on the thing that says turn off the lights when you leave the room. Save energy. Okay? This was a big thing, guys, saving energy because there was a shortage. All right? Now, when it comes to gas, fuel, okay, when you're driving, you guys want to have one of those cars that says, tells you how much mileage you're getting per gallon, and you guys have that in your car? Okay, then you drive a newer, kind of a newer model. You get better gas mileage at 80 miles an hour or 55 miles an hour. Huh? 55. Because when you're going 80, you're using a lot of gas. Okay, so President Carter said to the states, we need to conserve fuel. So he said, if you want this money, transportation, here it is. You'll change your speed limit to 55. And every state complied. From about 1977 to 1995, the fastest you could drive legally in all 50 states was 55 miles an hour. And you guys take a long road trip like this summer? Where'd you drive? Which part of Florida? Destin? 19 hours. At 55? Brutal. Anybody else? Take a long drive? Florida? That's even far. That's way far. Yeah. That's yeah, brutal. Yeah.
Why did they stop giving us oil?
Huh?
Why did stop trading?
Because our support of Israel, the Jews, and they didn't. OPEC's mostly Middle Eastern countries. They're not all Middle Eastern. Okay. So, as I told you, in 1994, Republicans took control of both houses for the first time in 40 years. And they said, listen, Montana is different than Rhode Island. Kansas is different than New Jersey. Shouldn't they decide how fast you can drive in those states? Or should it be a one-size-fits-all? Because I can't drive 55. It's horrible. I'm telling you guys, and I like to drive fast. It was awful. Now, in 1996, I was working at Mays High School as a para. Okay, you guys know what a para is? Okay, I just want to get in a classroom. It's like a classroom helper that's an adult. Okay, I just want to get some experience. Okay, so I'm driving out K96. Out towards Mays. You guys know that road, right? It's 55. Okay, that morning when I'm driving to work, workers are out there taking down the 55 sign and putting up the 65 sign. And I'm honking my horn and rolling down the window and yelling, yeah! Now that stretch is 70 today. It's 70 now, right? Which is great because you get out there in the middle of nowhere, let's go, right? So we're going 75, 79. Okay? Now, federalism. Okay? States won that. States won that. Okay? Now, any of you guys know who Sammy Hagar is? Okay, I'm about to blow your minds. Now, this is 1980s MTV music video. Now, every year, Hartman Arena hosts something called Hairball, which is big hair from the 80s, rock and roll. Okay, and Sammy Hagar was a solo artist and had a great solo career. And then this band called Van Halen kicked out their lead singer, David Lee Roth. They got rid of him. One of the best frontmans ever. Like, this dude could freaking wail. All right? So they brought in Sammy Hagar to be the lead singer of Van Halen. And they produced a couple of albums which are fantastic. This is 1980s rock. I Can't Drive 55. I'm about to blow you away right here. Am I out of time?
Got a couple of minutes.
Oh, this thing is running great.
Real quick, page 60, they talk about powers, okay? There's powers on page 60. There's 15 questions on page 61. You use page 60 to answer the questions on 61. Shoot me a message if you need any help. If you can't figure it out, Google it, and it's easy. 15 points due tomorrow night. Let's get back to Sammy Hagar and his Ferrari.
It's just running great. It's so smooth into the curves. And what you do, Claudio?
I'm gonna have to.
Oh, what a difference. Look out, hey,
YouTube will not.
get out of here. I'm driving it home. Come on.